Okay. Hello, my name is Brandon Musler, and I'm here with Bill Clancy.
Hello.
More on Bill anon. I have my privilege here. Um, and we're going to be showing you a game today called The Royal Navy from Jack Green. Bill and I have never met in person. We are you hear about Facebook friends. I don't know. What was it? What kind
We
of friends are we, Bill?
we're email internet buddies, I
Yeah,
guess.
we're email.
Well,
I
we
guess
we
yes.
we we met we met. I think did we not with uh uh the SPI Keith Martin's SPI games. What was that? Hex Wars.
Yes, we met
Back
at
in the
Hexwell.
in the very
Right.
late 90s.
We met cute. They were going to make a rom com out of it, but the contracts got very.
No, no.
Anyway, so Bill and I actually live on different continents. I'm in the United States in Chicago, and Bill is
In Melbourne, Australia.
right. And so this is just this is a worldwide joint. All right. So why should you be watching this? That's the question you're asking yourself by now already. And I would give you three reasons, real quick. You should be watching this if you're interested in gaming, doing naval gaming for the first time, or switching rules. Maybe you've done some, but you're not comfortable with the rule set you have, and you're looking for a better one. That's one reason. Um, if you're an experienced gamer, you should be also interested in this because this is a great game for multiplayer. So if you want to put on a game at a convention or your local game club and you want to have more than two players, maybe more than three, maybe more than six, this game can accommodate that. You can do very large scenarios, and they're a lot more fun with a lot more commands. Um, and the third reason is what I just think that this game is it's what I consider to be the 80-20 rule, which is that 80% of what you're going to need conceptually to play even the most advanced naval war games, like Sea Creek 5 or Command at Sea, are in this game, and yet with only 20% of the time and energy to learn them. So this is a really good price performer in terms of your time. So without further ado, let's get into this. You see before you the rules. Um, Royal Navy is a Jack Green design. It came out in the 80s. It would have been the same generation of games. Probably most people, if they were playing naval war games, would be playing General Quarters 1 or 2 at this time period. I think this is a much better game, although those games are okay. Um, this what this game did, why it's historically interesting, is because it sort of moved people away from a damage system where you did things proportionately. They call it the salami slice damage. It moved the game into an area where you could have your ship lost by taking a pounding gradually, or like when the hood was struck and blew up all at once. That was kind of a new thing. It also introduced new tools into gaming. This was the first war game. There were some role playing games that used 10-sided die that I know of. There was maybe one other game at this time period that was doing it. Jack Green brought that into the hobby. And it it is also very derivative of miniatures rules. So what Jack basically did is he created a miniature rule set and then put it on a hex board and with numbered hexes so that you could play this um, as a board game rather than having to spend the money and resources to go out and play it with miniatures. Although I like to play it with miniatures, but all right, couple of basic things. First of all, the C scale. Each hex represents in the daytime, and I'll be doing this a lot because you can do scenarios at day and night, and the rules vary slightly. If daytime, a hex represents 1,500 yards, which is 3/4 of a naval mile. It's a big hex, and the turn length is 7.5 minutes. That's a long-term length
Do you,
because sure, Bill.
Brandon? Do you want do you want to put up the map now?
We could do that.
Don't worry, I'll just cut out my comment.
Okay. All right, let's take a look at the game board. So these hexes is what I'm talking about, and we're gonna be playing in the next video, doing a run through of a scenario that is a day scenario, Cape Spada, which is Italian cruisers, which are down here, and against some British destroyers, which are here, and the British will be getting some reinforcements later in the day. But anyway, these hexes during the daytime represent 1,500 yards, as I was saying. At night, it's 600 yards and a 3-minute turn. Okay, so that's the scale the game is played on. And these are land. These represent spits of land, and Cape. This is Cape Spada right here, I believe. And Bill's cleverly used the original components from the board game. He's cut them out, trimmed them, and put them exactly where they belong on the game map. And before we go any further, we're playing with Vassal. We're using Vassal so that we, in fact, can play from Australia to the United States. And the advantage here is that every single scenario that you would have to set up in the board game, if you're playing head-to-head, is pre-set up for you. So if I load a scenario onto this game, let me just see here if it's, oh no, I better not do that. Okay. All the land, there's not a lot of scenarios with land, but those that do have it will be on there. The ships are in their correct facing. They have the leader with them, and they're in the right spot on the game to begin the game. Okay. Right then. So let's talk about, okay.
Maybe well, just follow the rules, I guess. I mean, you've talked generally about.
I'm going to do this. Yeah, there's one last thing. One other context I should give is that this game, Jack Green designed 2 games before this, Iron Bottom Sound, which covered the Solomons campaign, Guadalcanal and all that, coming down the slot, fighting the Japanese. And that's strictly the Pacific Theater. And he did another game called Destroyer Captain, which is obviously smaller ships. There are some light cruisers in the game, but it's basically destroyers, destroyer escorts, that kind of thing. And then he did this game. And this game covered scenarios anywhere except the Pacific, pretty much. So all over the world, heavy concentration on the Mediterranean, which is interesting because most American gamers never really get around to that. And it also involves everything from destroyer escorts all the way up to, Musashi and Yamato. And you can play very small scenarios where you had, squadron of destroyers against another, or, you can do a Jutland scenario where you've got all the destroyers trying to sink the sagelets or whatever. So
Brandon,
for scope,
so the games virtually cover the First World War era and the Second World War era, plus the interwar years. Is that?
That's right. There's not a lot of interwar years, although, but it is mostly World War One and Two, and so that time scale. There's even a Russo-Japanese War scenario, I think. So the time scale is pretty vast, and even ruling out the Pacific, you still have a ton of geography to cover. So certainly the Atlantic battles, as well as anything in the Baltic, as well as anything in the Med, as well as anything in the North Sea, and you get the idea. Alrighty, so I think it's time to talk about the rules real quickly. I'm going to run through the turn sequence. There will be no quiz. You don't have to memorize it. Just give you a feel for how this works. You bring on your reinforcements if you have any at the beginning of the turn. The first thing you do is, if you have torpedoes and you have a shot, you plot out your torpedoes. There's actually 2 different ways to resolve torpedo combat in this game, but the basic one is we say, okay, who are these torpedoes going to be shot at? We don't shoot them. You just note it down. Then we determine who has the initiative, which will stay the same until one side or the other loses its admiral. In this scenario, for instance, I believe the British have it, and until the British commander is killed, they will have it. Then we do movement. Movement is done. There's two ways you can do it. You can do pre-plotted movement, but that's kind of going out of fashion. People don't tend to like that as much as they did when the game was introduced. So the way we do it now is the side without initiative moves half, the initiative side moves its full movement, and then the side without initiative moves second half. It sounds clunky. It works remarkably well. You'll never miss plotted movement. Okay, then we do gunnery during the day. There's 2 rounds of gunnery combat where you shoot, then you mark down the damage. He does the same, and then there's a second round of combat. So if between the 2 rounds somebody has their guns knocked out, they don't fire them in the second round of combat. During the evening, when the turns are only 3 minutes, there's only 1 round of combat. And then we have the torpedo effects phase. So that's when we find out if your torpedoes hit. And why is that important? It comes after gunnery. So you might sink someone with guns and then torpedo the Hulk, if you will. You don't know ahead of time. And that's the way it works in real life. The shells move a lot faster than the torpedoes. So, and then there's the end of turn phase where, like, if you have a fire on board, you get to roll to put it out or see if it spreads. And, rinse, wash, repeat. Until one side or another wins the game. Now, the game comes with scenarios. There's I think a dozen in the basic game. Oh, this is number 12. No,
you can click on the scenario instructions, and I think it'll have a count there.
Right, it'll have like 15, and we put in some extra ones too.
Yeah.
So I think it came with 13, and I think Alive with Torpedoes, First Battle of Narvik, No Troops for Rommel, and New Year's Eve in the Barents Sea were all ones that were added by Jack Green in various publications, gaming publications afterwards. And so we copied those and put those in as well. But you could see all the original ones are on this sort of nice mustard flavored. And they give you how to set up the game, which, as I say, Bill is nicely done for you in Vassal. But there's other things in here like the victory conditions. Also a historical sort of introduction, as well as it tells you what happened historically so you can compare your results. And occasionally, like here, you see there's an optional rule where it says, oh, okay, well, Glasgow, really, have her remove slowly, have her move at 444 because she's taken some damage from the day before, rather than have her full movement strength in there. All right. Well, I think what we should do now is look at the map in a little bit more detail now. I said there's some games have terrain, like in Iron Bottom Sound, is earlier design. You have the coast of Guadalcanal and you'll have Savile Island. Here, there's some Mediterranean spits of land every now and then. Mostly though, you're out in open sea. Now, one of the things I want to do is another thing that Bill added is if I come here. Okay, so that's a leader. By the way, we can do better for you here. Blow this up a little bit. Right, so that's an admiral. And the -1, the more negative his rating, the better, okay? So Casardi was historically the rear admiral that was with these 2 light cruisers when this happened. And so that's when I say when you're determining initiative, you're going by this number. Now, the counters have 3 pieces of information on them besides the silhouette. One is simply the name of the ship and the class of the ship. It's a light cruiser, so Bandolier is a light cruiser. 666 is his speed. It's not a sign that he's in league with the devil. But it's an unusual and a unique movement system where what you're really looking at is his movement, or I should say her movements, ships are female, her movement over 3 turns. And so what this is saying is, in 3 turns, you can move 18 hexes, 6 for each of them. But not all ships are uniform that way. Otherwise, they would just have one number on them, 6. So this allows the designer, Jack Green, to differentiate movement more in a more granular way. So on the first turn, this ship will move 6. The second turn, 6. But on the third one, only 5, which will mean those cruisers are faster. They can move 1 hex faster over 3 turns. And the secret here, if you want to know, okay, well, how fast were these ships? You can just add those 3 numbers together. In this case of Hero, 12 plus 5 is 17, and then double it. And then it'll tell you, well, Hero's top speed she was a 34 knot destroyer. And those Italian cruisers, which have very little armor but are very fast, 666 means they're 36 knot ships. And here we have the ILX here. You notice is a whoops, let me get that pop up again. Yeah, 16. So it's only a 32 knot ship. So we are able to differentiate here in a more granular way between a 32 and a 34 knot ship. Yes, Bill?
Sorry, I was just going to say that's. I was just adding it up loudly. Don't mind me.
Okay. Well, okay. So, and notice here, Nicholson, good old Nicholson here. He's a -2, which you think would make him bad, but actually, Jack Green does everything kind of in the reverse mode of most designers, where down is up and up is down. Some people call it frontsy backsy day. Anyway, where we are right now, though, is I want to show you one other thing that's kind of cool. This is one of the things Bill did, except for interrupting me. He actually does have a function, which is if I can actually seize one of the ships, he has put in all of the statistics that are on the ship log, which normally, again, you would have to. I did that twice, so it came out twice. You would have to fill in on your ship log, and we're going to get to the ship log in just a second. But if you want to know what primary gun and what the range is, it's right there with a right click. There's the speed. That's how many hull factors it has, and these actually, you can knock them out so they show sinking condition. Whether the main fire control is okay, its flotation, torpedoes. This says that it has 2 torpedo factors on a centerline mount, which is basically means it has each torpedo factor is actually 2 torpedoes. So this is 4 torpedoes on one mount, and it's mounted in the center, so it can fire port or starboard. And victory points. Virtually all destroyers are either 2 or 3 victory points. And we can go back briefly and look at if I actually choose one.
Just double click on it.
Yeah, sure. Why am I having so much trouble with this? There we go. It has to be in the top. Then you can do the properties, right? And we'll pull those up here. So let's take a quick look at this, because here it's not just any 6-inch gun, because this game differentiates between 6-inch guns, even Italian 6-inch guns. This is a 6-inch gun of 24 caliber, so that's for the Dash 24, and its range is 16. Now, right away, bell should be go off in your head. Well, yeah, British destroyers' range is only 12. That might give you an idea what Italian tactics should be. But the Italians also have a secondary gun, because these are cruisers, not destroyers. Destroyers never have secondary guns. So their range is 11, almost as good as the British. But that's interesting, because it says something's 11 hexes away. Well, you can fire your secondary guns at one British destroyer and your primaries at another and not pay any penalty for that. There are no tertiaries here. Some of the old-fashioned German ships have them. Ship speed, same here. As we've already noted, it has 7 hull boxes compared to 3 for the destroyers. And then, these boxes are not all empty. That's because it has a modicum of armor. A 1-inch belt, 1 inch on our turrets, 2 inches on the bridge, which might actually save a captain sometimes, and 2 inches on the deck. Now, that's not a lot of armor, but if you stay at a range, at a distance, it might be enough. And well, how do we know that kind of thing? Am I looking at the right one? Yeah. Let's see. Armor penetration table. Right. And that's, so this just gives you an idea about the game and the level of detail. So look at that. The British had these 4.7-inch guns, right? And so, oops, we go on the 4.7-inch here, and we look for which one's British. Here it is, British 4.7. And how would 1 inch of armor ever be able to keep a shell away? Well, if we go up here and follow the line to 1 inch, well, that, and then come across here. During a daylight engagement, I said the scenario when it plays daylight, at 15,000 yards, which is 9 to 10 hexes, that's enough to keep a shell out. Because if it's a tie, it goes to the defender in this game. So 1 inch penetration, 1 inch armor, boing, it bounces off. And it does matter whether shells penetrate or not. The game differentiates that. And the if you are firing high explosive shells, you won't penetrate any armor at all. So just trying to give you a little bit of an idea of the play of the game. Okay, but I think enough for now. And we can zoom back out. Now, one of the things, yeah, that's that. I should show you that. That's sort of the overview you can get at maximum. And so you see, relatively speaking, there's 2 spits of land here. The British destroyers are intercepting the Italian cruisers, which are basically just rebasing. They're going to a new base where they think they can prey on British shipping in Greek waters. But with Ultra and all that kind of good stuff, the British knew about it and came to cut them off. All right. So we've been through the counters. They really only have speed and name on them and class of ship. The ship logs is the next thing that we need to cover. And for that, I'm going to kind of scoot out of here for a moment. Bear with me. And well, let's show you a blank one first. All right, well, this isn't a blank one. All right, but this is a ship log. You can see it now, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the things we'll be filling out. This is how it came in the original game. And very briefly, you can make your own. I will show you. Let me see. Let's see. I thought I put it in here. I didn't. Oh, darn it. Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the Italian cruisers. The game comes with a description of the different classes of warships by nation, broken down into a series of numbers that represent the performance characteristics of the ship. So let's go through, in this case, these 2 Italian light cruisers. All right, so this is their name. The fact that they're light cruisers. We reviewed earlier how some of this has already been put into the game for you. 6-inch guns, 3.9-inch secondaries, no tertiaries, the speed, the flotation class. If you get hit with a torpedo, that becomes very important. It carried 24-inch torpedoes. It has 7 hull boxes. It was commissioned in 1930, and it's worth 7 victory points. Now, that is already on the counter, most of it.
In that properties, in the box and properties.
When you right-click on the box, yeah, you select the ship and you right-click, and it shows you the properties of the ship. So that's for quick reference. You don't have to go and look at these sheets. However, the numbers to the right here are the actual layout. This is the way the turrets are. You have 4 centerline turrets, 2 in the bow, 2 aft. Um, and they're numbered like this: 3-2, meaning the outside one. If you take damage to the bow turret, you start with the furthest one outside and you move in. So what do I mean by move in? You cross them off because they're knocked out. And that is the part of the game that goes on the ship's log. It is the record of your ship as it is sort of degraded in combat, either by gunfire or torpedo fire or fires, that start. Um, but this is the turret, and it shows, when it's a centerline turret like this, you can shoot forward and you can shoot to starboard or port. You just can't shoot straight back. But these guys can fire off the stern and then the same. This thing here, this little, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's showing it has torpedoes. It's on the center line. It has 1 torpedo factor, which is a grand total of 2 torpedoes. And this is the secondary gun. It's only worth 2, but if you're close enough, or you get lucky enough, you can hit. So it's different because it's smaller and it only has 1 line on it versus 2. And then this is sort of, these 3 boxes represent, the middle one is your main fire control. So that's something that directs your shell fire. And if you lose it, it's basically the bridge. If that gets knocked out, then you have a modifier that makes it harder to hit. If you had radar, it would go in this box here. So this ship does not have radar, but it is carrying a scout plane.
Sorry, Brandon, what does it have if it has radar? What is there a symbol in the box or
an R? It'll just put an R in there.
Yep.
Yeah, the Italians didn't have a lot of radar on their ships, so the sheet we're looking at doesn't have that. But radars can be very important, but it is fragile. Okay, now, so why are all these things here? Well, and also here's all your armor ratings. Now, remember, this was all on the properties box as well, how much armor, where it is, and the range of the guns. These are the last 2. You're going to take this highlighted row of numbers. This is the original way it was done, at least. A lot of it's already done for you, but so you're going to take especially the turrets, where they are, the torpedoes, and you're going to notate that like this. And I've kind of highlighted the Coleone here. But again, before we talked about it being a B flotation. If you got hit with a torpedo, it's there. It's a light cruiser, 21-inch torpedoes, gun range, and all the armor. So this is the old way that, you had to do this. Again, that all stays the same, and that's all on
Vassal.
Yeah, it's on Vassal, and it's on the counters. But you do have to know which turrets are knocked out. So you do need to fill out something like this, so you keep track of how many hull boxes you have left, so that you know whether the plane has been hit. That can start a fire. And you can't really see it here, but those are your secondary guns. There are little 2s in them. And then here, remember, these are generic ship forms, so they're for any cruiser. So some cruisers might have, rather than centerline, might have torpedoes that can only fire to port or to starboard. In this case, or you might have all 3. Some Japanese ships would have all of these torpedo mounts. And in this case, it just has the 1 center line. And again, there's extra turrets here if you need them. But in this particular case, we've got the standard 4 turret outlet layout. Now, a little bit here, this is your speed designation. And right now it's set to 666. In other words, all your speed is available to you. All of these boxes are unmarked. But if you take a speed loss, you slow down because of a steam leak from a hit or something, you might say take -1 speed. Well, what happens then? Well, you just cross off this bottom left-hand corner box, and now it says 665. I know it's well nigh impossible to read that, but if you have the actual physical sheet in front of you, this is how you mark your speed loss over time. And like you
Brandon, can I just
see,
check? So when you're doing the speed hits, the practice is that you do the last speed first. So if
correct, the
okay,
bottom
so
row.
so if I lose one half a knot off my speed, I'm going to cross off the 6 on this. If I lose another one, I cross off the 5 and so on the bottom row of that speed thing.
Okay, well, actually, no.
Uh,
The rule is bottom to top, left to right.
okay.
So when you lose the first 6, it makes you a 665. When you move the second 6, you wouldn't get rid of the 5 because that would make you a 664. You want to do
I
the
move
next
up.
one up
I'm
above it,
moving up. Yep.
and you become a 655.
Yep. That makes
And
actually that
then
makes sense.
yeah, it actually is a convention that takes a little bit of use, but once you're used to it, this really works
Mm.
because he has this odd thing with it. You've got to know over 3 increments, and this is the way you track it. So, and just real quickly to show you, the well, I've added a ship here, but here's the Sydney make, and this should be near and dear to Bill's heart because tell us a little about the Sydney Bill. Do you know about this ship?
Didn't it get sunk by uh, well, not
Well,
clearly
let's start with
known.
the basics. Does it
Yeah.
say HMS in front of it?
No, it doesn't.
What does it say?
It should say HMAS.
Yes, it's an Australian ship. One of the reasons we're playing this scenario, not really, but but that's a reinforcement. So I'm just showing you, uh, and I've added. So now here's the destroyers, and to show you real quickly. Almost all the destroyers are the same, but remember we were showing that good old Ilex here is a 655, making it slower than some of these. Actually, some of these are some of these were 6.5s and some of them were 6.5. But anyway, but there's another small difference, which is that Ilex has an extra torpedo. So they have 2 torpedo factors, and Ilex has 3. And the point being simply that there's a tremendous amount of detail in this game in terms of how the ships are laid out, and they've done them by class, but it differentiates between, for instance, these are Hunt class destroyer escorts. Well, there's 2 types of Hunt. There's actually 3 in reality, but it's showing 2 different types for one scenario because they had them. And this one's a 444 and this is a 443. So this allows a lot of flexibility, and it's the reason he did it. Okay, just real quickly, I want to mention again that just see the destroyers are just they have 1 turret, 2 torpedo factors, and very little else except 3 hull boxes and a bridge. But you see how the speed here is already somewhat blacked out, and that is going to be a 655 speed. The reason is the template for the destroyers goes up to 7 because some of the French destroyers go that fast that you need a 7 row. But anyway, so this is accurately showing these 2 destroyers, and most of them, in fact, are 655s except for 665, except for Ilex. All right, enough of this. Let us go back to. I think at this point, maybe we do a quick run through of
The charts.
Yeah. Now we did the gunnery chart,
Yeah.
and we'll come back to that when we actually
Yeah.
play the game. But here's how it works real quick. You figure out the modifications. It's just plus or minus. There's 2 separate rows, one for day, one for night, and then you go through all the modifiers and the optionals if you want them. And then you roll dice. You roll decimal dice. And from that, we go here. We figure out how many fire factors we have and what the die roll is, and then that'll tell us how many hits we get, if any. Usually it's 0, but you can get as many as 8 if you've got.
So if just if you were using, say, one of those cruisers firing back at one of the destroyers.
Right. Okay. So the cruisers. Let me see. They were 3-2-3-2. So they're on the 10.
Yeah.
So you're on this 10 row. Your fire factors, right?
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of modifiers. I'm not going to run through them right now, but basically, you roll two dice and you apply the modifiers. And if you can roll under a 22, if you roll between 14 and 21, which is an 8% chance here of getting one hit.
Yep.
If you're even luckier than that and you roll under a 13 or under, oh, that's another 8%. Well, that's even 9. And then
You got a 4% chance of 3 hits.
you do. But it depends on, as I said, the modifiers are enormous.
Yeah.
Even though these are decimal die, some of the modifiers are up to 70. So,
Whoa.
Yeah. So this can be hard to get hits if you're really distant. And one thing I want you to note, because it's characteristic of this game that people never forget if it happens to them, when you roll a 99 or 100, which sounds really, really good, it's really, really bad. Because this is a Jack Green game, and up is down and down is up.
Yeah, it's all back to front.
So what that means is your gun has exploded or it's caused damage somehow to your own ship. So not only don't you get the hit you just rolled, but you actually do damage to your own ship. Anyway, all right. So if you get a hit, now once we know how many hits you get 2 hits. Then you come here. Where are the hits? This is gunnery hit results table, right? And again, this is straight up decimal. There's not a lot of modifying here. It's just a matter of what you roll. So let's say you roll a 92. Okay, that did 2 hull damage, and it cost 2 movement factors to the ship that got hit.
Now, if it's 2 movement factors, it's not still taken off. It's taken off sequentially up the left. Is that right? It's not.
Yes. Yep. Yes. It's up and to the right. So if you started out as a 655, you would become a 554.
Yep.
Right. You see, and a lot of, not so much in this column, although there are a few. You see these ampersands, and what do those stand for? Well, that means you have to penetrate the armor, and that's when we resort to this table here. Okay, so that's where a cruiser, you might hit him, but if he's got enough armor, he won't have to suffer this damage. Whereas a destroyer, which has no armor, is automatically going to have to take this damage. So that's the way he differentiates. And of course, you say, yes, but it's not binary. Remember, we check to see how much armor and what the range is and what the shell penetrates. So this is sort of reducing a lot of different factors into one table. And Bill was very clever because it's double wide, and he managed to fit it on here, which I didn't think he could do.
Neither did Bill.
Hey, pulled a rabbit out of his hat on that one. I would also note that you might get something if you roll in the 20s or less, quote, special damage. Okay, the special damage is really nasty stuff. It's stuff that affects propulsion or kills your captain or admiral. It might knock out turrets. That's all here. So that's more rolling.
And this is a percentage dice too, isn't it?
It is. Here we have to go here to get to the other half of the table. Yeah, these are the ones where these are all ones where you have to penetrate the armor in order to get the special damage. But if you do, you could, like this one says, lose a primary. If it's a World War I ship, it sinks. That's pretty nasty, right? And so you can see a lot of these. All right, it's bad enough having a fire set or whatever, but here, your entire ship could sink, and there's one ship explodes and sinks. So this is your sort of HMS Hood possibility, 1991. There's not a lot of those, but it can happen. First, of course, you have to penetrate. In this case, this DK stands for the deck armor, right? So it can happen to you. And then another way you can get sunk is by torpedoes. This is the torpedo characteristics chart, which differentiates between, for instance, if you're, well, the Americans aren't in this game, but I was going to say it differentiates between the American torpedoes that detonate, i.e. the old ones, or the new ones. But here we see British torpedoes from World War I, World War II, same for the Germans. The Italians had 17.7 inch. Everybody else had 21-inch torpedoes in World War II. The Italians were still using their World War One equipment, so you've got those. And is the British? Oh yes, my favorite here. The British had a 24.5-inch torpedo, which you would think would be as fearsome as the Longlegs, but really the only ships that carried them were they're two big 16-inch battleships, Nelson and Rod.
And I
No,
noticed the torpedoes have the same movement structure as the ships.
right, and that is because you can treat them as if they are ships. You can use what's called impulse movement, which is another thing. I guess Starfleet Battles was using that back in the days, which was almost like a naval game in space.
Mm.
But and you can go hex by hex to make sure that the two things enter the hex at the same time, or you can use a simpler rules, which you just target a ship and you roll a dice and see if it hits. But yeah, and the thing about this is it also gives you the hex range, which if you put like if you look at the German torpedoes here for World War II, if you put them on their slow setting, 555, which is a 30 knot setting, it can go 25 hexes, which is all the way across the board. If the target is closer, you put it on 8.7. So while this only covers 10 in the first two increments, it'll cover 15, but it runs out after 10. So it's going at an 8 or a 7 in terms of the increment movement on the chart. They're moving faster than any of the ships move, but after 10 hexes, they peter out, right? And it actually gives you the day range next to it. And also, for what it's worth, these torpedo hit modifiers, remember, they differentiate by sort of the quality of the weapon too. So these World War One torpedoes are less likely to hit. They don't keep station as well when they're not as reliable either. And you see some of these have no modifiers, and that's actually a good thing. Little known thing: the French had probably, besides the Japanese, the best torpedoes in World War II, as far as I could tell. Okay, other tables real quick. This is what happens if you get hit by a torpedo, the damage it does. Remember I mentioned flotation size. So, if you get hit by a torpedo
Roll
and
low.
you're a B, yeah, exactly, because you're much more likely to get sunk than if you're an H or an I, which would be battleships. This also shows you speed loss. This is just how you figure out whether you were hit or not. This is the simple rules. And again, here you want to roll high. And fire on board. If you get a fire, you will from turn to turn to see whether it goes out, like an 8 or a 9, it has no effect, or it starts doing damage, like knocking out hulls and movement factors and things. And finally, if you were unlucky enough to roll that 00, that 99, this is the effect it has on your ship, like starting a fire or a gun permanently knocked out. That's not good, but here it's only temporary one turn. So it just gives you an idea of sort of the chrome of the game. And that's it for tables. Right. So let me see. The only other thing is to explain that there are also counters in the game for doing things like star shells, spotlight, smoke. There's the leader counters. There's wreck markers, because you can, in theory, collide with a wreck. So all that's in the game too. Most of that stuff pertains to night actions, and we're going to be playing a day action game today, so we probably won't drop most of it out. But they're all here. The whole game is basically here. If you and I should say this: some of the tables you do have either 1 or 2 die 6. It tells you explicitly. So Bill has all 3 types of die here, which is handy. You see the results. All right. With that, I think we've spent enough time on the actual physical components. And I think we've gone through Yeah. I think what we really should do, we've talked enough, should probably begin playing the game and working out this stuff in an actual scenario.
Okay.